Through the Storm series, where we're focusing in on how can we face some of life's biggest trials. And so our theme verse for this is Luke 6:47 to 49. And let me read that for us now. It says, "For everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment that the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete." And so with this, I want to draw our attention back to verse 47. It's the very first one that we read. And I just want you to hear what Jesus is setting the scene up. He says, "As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words, and catch this, and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like." And so what Jesus is doing is in our life, we have so many different voices and so many different ways that we can live. Well, there's so many ways that I can get my life to go this direction and that direction. I can go this way and that way. There's so many things that are telling me how to live my life, and there's so many things that are telling you how to live your life, what to live for, what to motivate you. And so Jesus is saying you've got to know what your focus is and then put that into practice. So it's not only just me keeping my focus in on Jesus, but whatever my focus is that there's going to be my heart and my actions. And Jesus is aligning our focus with what's going to happen in our life. It is the very lead train, and the rest of our life is always going to follow where our focus is set on, where I'm looking at, where my thoughts are going to, what is motivating me to get through the day. So Jesus is saying that our focus is key. We just finished up Ezra's soccer season, and so I love when little kids play soccer because they all just chase the ball. There's no strategy, there's not really teamwork there. The ball goes somewhere, and then a herd of children follow that ball. And then their goal is just to kick the ball, right? They know where the goals are, but as soon as they get to the ball, I'm just going to kick it as hard as I can, and we're going to see where it goes. And so it's been fun to watch him this season, but I think our life can be a lot like kids chasing the soccer ball. We are so focused in on what is in front of us and getting through that day and getting through the season and just getting through this moment. And so we barely pick our heads up to focus in on what we need to. Our heads are down, and wherever that ball is where I'm going. And rarely does my focus ever pick up to see where I need to go. And so Jesus and what Scripture is going to do in the New Testament is constantly point us towards having a heavenly and eternal mindset, where my focus and your focus is not set in on just today and in this moment. It is supposed to be set on what God is going to be doing when He redeems all of humanity. So how does a storm, the things that you go through and the trials of life, intersect that focus? Well, I think a lot of times when we go through storms, we still look at that soccer ball and we're still chasing. Our focus is not on what God's going to be doing, and our hope does not rest on what God's going to be doing where He redeems all of creation. Our hope gets so easily set to the light of the end of the immediate tunnel, that the end of the immediate storm, the end of the immediate trial, that is where my hope is. That when God finally comes through and answers the prayer request, when God finally shows up and changes everything, that my hope rests on this storm ending. Rarely does my hope begin to rest on what is eternal and what God is going to do when He redeems all of creation. So the question you have to ask is, when your hope rests, when your mindset and all of your thoughts on what gets you through is, God, just get me through this storm, when that is our whole mindset, that's our whole motivation, what's going to happen when God doesn't work in the way you want Him to? What happens if God decides to delay answering your prayer request? Or what if the storm doesn't turn out in the way that you want? And what's going to be our response? Now, I'm not saying that it's bad for us to hope that things get better and that there's a hope that the storm ends. But there's also an equal question that we need to ask. If that's all of my thoughts and all of my motivation, and that's the single thing that's getting me through the day, what happens when God doesn't work the way that I want Him to? What if He doesn't show up? And what if He doesn't do the things that I'm wanting Him to do? And the Christians in the New Testament are constantly set not just to get through this immediate moment, but we are constantly reminded that our mindset and our thoughts and our heart has to be on what's to come. because God may not move and do the things that we want him to, and he's going to have good reason for it. But if our hopes are so reliant on what's going to happen in this life, the ultimate reality is that we're to be pitied. Because as Christians, we don't live for this life. We live for the life to come. And our hope is not about trying to make the most of this life. Our hope is in what God's going to be doing when he redeems all of creation. And that's a hard truth, especially as you go through a storm. But if we begin to allow that seed to plant itself deep in our hearts, then it's something that gets us and motivates us and allows us to rejoice, to have strength and confidence in storms, because my hope and your hope does not rest on what I'm going through in this moment and what I'm feeling in this moment. It is on what is to come. That's what we're going to be looking at. And so what you are focused in on is where your hope's going to be. When your focus changes, your hope changes. When I was first learning how to drive a car, and if I was looking at a car beside me or people beside me or a building beside me, if I looked left, my car began to drift left. And if I looked right, started looking over here, not looking at the road, give me some grace, then my car would drift that way. Wherever my head was and wherever my sight was, that's where the car went. And the same is true for our lives, that whatever I am focused in on, my heart is going to follow that direction. Wherever you are thinking about, whatever you are spending your time doing, your heart is going to follow where you invest your time. And so we've got to make sure that our focus is in on the right things. And so that's where we're going to be. 1 Peter 1, 3-7 is where we're going to be today. 1 Peter 1, 3-7. And Peter is going to jump in and talk exactly about the stuff that we just introduced. See, for Peter is going through a lot of persecution. Jerusalem is where the persecution breaks out because the Jews and the Israelites at that time did not like Jesus. They didn't care for him. The Pharisees wanted to see the Christian message stamped out. And so they were starting to persecute the Christians hard, which meant Peter, as the leader of the church, is going to be persecuted pretty hard, and they're going to come after him. Because if they can get the leader, then they can get the movement to stop. And so Peter is one of the key leaders, is writing to a church that's hurting. So as we read the words that we're getting ready to listen, or the Peter's writing, Peter's not far removed. His life is not great. He's not got it really easy. He's in the middle of people coming after him and his family. He's writing to people who have lost jobs because they follow Jesus. Not because they made some mistake, not because they did something wrong. They followed Jesus, and there were repercussions to pay. He's writing to people who have lost friends and family, who have been killed for following Jesus. And so as he begins to talk about trials, he's not talking to people that have not gone through anything, have not faced storms. He's writing to people that are in the middle of massive storms, where they have moved cities and they have lost everything, and they are trying to figure out what to do next. And this is Peter's encouragement for them. And it could be our encouragement as well if we let it. 1 Peter 1, 3-7. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through the faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all of this, you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may suffer grief in all kinds of trials. All the things that they're going through. Verse 7. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. There's two verses that come before this. In the very opening of his letter, Peter's writing to people that are hurting and in pain, and where does he point them? The very first thing he points them to in verse 4 is their salvation, which is an interesting place to start. I don't know if I would start my letter that way if I'm writing to people that are hurting and in pain. But Peter reminds us something great and key, and something that we often overlook. That our salvation is a source of great joy for us. And if we're honest, within the modern day America and following Jesus, many times we accept Jesus and then we're just ready to move on to the next thing. God, you've given me my salvation, and now what's next? We are constantly looking for more. And it's hard for us to be content within our relationship with God, to rejoice in the fact that we have a relationship with the Lord who made everything and who died for us. It is hard for us to be content with just that. And that if we watch our social media posts, if we watch what people talk about, well, they praise and they worship Jesus when God comes through for them. That when God does something amazing and when he shows up, well, that's going to be the moment that I rejoice. That's going to be the moment that I praise the Lord. But oftentimes when storms come, those very same people, and even me included, have been silent. Because at some point, the joy of our salvation has been lost. It is like we treat God as this genie in a lamp, where we constantly go to him and say, God, I want more, and I want more, and I want more. And if you do these things, then I will praise you. It's hard for us just to be content with the salvation that God brings. But if we go through the New Testament, time and time again, the thing that brings people praise of God and worshiping him, it is their relationship with him. And we have got to be careful not to constantly just want and want and want, and allow the only time that we praise God, the only time that we come to him, the only time that we rejoice, the only time that we truly feel worship is when we're getting something. Because then we're not really content with Jesus. We're content with us getting and receiving. I'm not saying it's bad for you to pray for those things and ask God to show up in amazing ways. But if that's the only time that we're praising God, if that's the only time that we're feeling the most close to God is when we're getting, then there's something wrong with our salvation. There's something wrong with our relationship with the Lord. And so then when we go through storms and when life is not going our way, then we've set ourselves up for failure. Because the exact opposite is starting to happen. Life is not easy, and God is not showing up in the way that you want him to. And so how are you going to respond in that moment? And the bigger question is salvation enough for you? Is Jesus enough for you? Or do you constantly need something else? You need something more from God for you to be happy and for you to be content, for you to feel joy. And so as Peter is writing to people that are hurting, he starts them off resting in a salvation that God's made all through what he's done. It's something that's beautiful and amazing, because the other side of that is like we talked about last week. And that when you start working, it is all about what you can do. Everything is about what you offer somebody else. And there's a lot of relationships that we have where it's all about what we can do for other people. And so then when we go through storms have this unique way and this crazy way to hit us in all the spots that are our weakness, the things that we don't like, the things that we can't have control over, the things that we can't fix. And so as storms hit those areas, we feel completely helpless. And the beautiful thing that Peter starts off and reminds us, it says in verse 3, in his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. At no point did Peter rely any part of that on you or on me. Our salvation is so accomplished by what Jesus has done that we are just responding to it. And so as storms come through life, there's no part of that storm that's ever going to be able to touch your salvation or your relationship with the Lord. And that should be a point that we can rejoice and find confidence in. But many times we do not rejoice and we do not have confidence in because life is not going the way we want it to. Because that storm has hit us in just the right spot at just the right time, and we have lost hope. Because we constantly go to the Lord and say, God, give me more, give me more. And at no point are we just content with rejoicing in the relationship that we have with him. That at any given time you can call out to him. At any given time the Lord listens to you intently. That he is constantly involved in the smallest details in your life. We so easily overlook that. And in Sunday school today, we were talking about Jacob and Esau, and there's this point where Jacob tricks Esau. And he says, hey, if you sell me your birthright, then I'll give you this soup to eat. And so Esau came in from the field. He's super tired, very hungry. And Jacob says, hey, give me your birthright. And Esau just easily trades it away. And we sit there and you're reading this and you're like, You are giving away your inheritance. All of that, your money, all of the things that your parents were going to give you, you just sold and got rid of for a bowl of soup. And we sit here and read this and we think that that is the craziest thing. Who would be dumb enough to do that? And I think that we are oftentimes are Esau and we sell out and trade over our relationship with Jesus for anything and everything else. Because I know that I'm certainly guilty of that. I allow the things of this life to be the thing that fills me with content and with joy and with happiness instead of allowing it to be the Lord in my relationship with Him. And so then when I go through storms, it's made all the worse because I haven't made this strong foundation that Jesus is talking about. My relationship with God is not strong enough because I'm constantly wanting and constantly desiring for God to give me more. And so I trade the invaluable worth of my salvation and the joy that that should bring for me just getting things, for the easiness of life. So we've got to be careful. That's why Peter starts off this letter reminding us that the most important thing that we have is our salvation. And that should be the source of great joy and that we can rejoice no matter what. So remember, these people their life's not great. They've suffered a lot. They have seen their friends and family die. They have lost their livelihood. They are probably in new towns starting all completely over. And so he starts them off with reminding them of the joy of their salvation. And when we go through storms, there's a point where we've got to change our focus and be reminded of the joy of our salvation. That our salvation should be a source of joy for us. And that there is nothing, no storm, no event through life, and no matter what we feel that can ever touch what Jesus has accomplished for you. It's not about what you bring or what you feel. It is about what Jesus has done. All right, secondly, let's look at verse 4. It says, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. What awaits us is imperishable and is untouched by what happens here. So when storms hit us, we've done a great job in building our life. We have all of these areas in our life, all these parts that we invest in, all these parts that make us us, all these things that we enjoy. And so there's all these versions of us, all these things that we get to enjoy in life. And when a storm comes and it's big enough and it hits it at just the right angle, there's rarely a storm that doesn't touch every area of our life, that doesn't impact and shape everything that we've built, everything that we've worked hard to accomplish, everything that we enjoy in life. When storms come, it somehow hits perfectly in each of those areas. And what Peter is reminding each of us is that your salvation and what is to come cannot be touched by what you're going through here. And we have to remind ourselves as we go through storms that our hope, our joy, and what we're looking forward to is not the end of this storm, it is what is to come. It is that an inheritance that God Himself guards. No storm can touch, no matter what we feel and what we're going through, no matter how bad the storm has wrecked everything that we've worked so hard to build, no matter what the trial is, it's your salvation and what is to come and God redeeming all of creation that will not be touched by the storm. We have to remind ourselves of that, especially the bigger the storm, because it can't touch that. There's a point where we feel helpless because we've seen the storm just wreck everything. But what awaits us is far greater and far better. God Himself guards our salvation and what's to come, the inheritance that Peter talks about. Lastly, suffering cannot compare to what awaits us. Look at verse 5. Who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. That's Jesus' return. And all of this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have to suffer grief of all kinds of trials. Peter says you're going to greatly rejoice, but you're going to have to go through a bunch of trials, a bunch of storms in life, things that you're not going to want to go through, things that are not pleasant, things that are not easy for you, but there's this element of rejoicing. Again, how do you rejoice in a storm? How do you rejoice when life is not going your way? It's because salvation and what's to come is far greater and far better. Ezra's gotten old enough to where we will watch a couple of the animated superhero movies, and one of my favorite superheroes is Superman. And he's incredibly strong, and hopefully you know Superman. He's pretty famous, but he can lift tons of weight. He constantly is saving the day, and there's not many things that can really get to him. The reason I bring this up, it would be as if you had Superman in front of you and you as a human were trying to punch him. Do you think he would feel that? No. Do you think he would even be pushed back at all? No. If you punched him, he'd be like, did you even hit me? Did you really do it? And I bring that up because the inheritance that awaits you is like Superman. What is to come with God redeeming everything, where there is no hurt and there is no pain and we are in perfect relationship with one another? There's no fighting. There's no sin. There's no disease. We are with Jesus. It's like Superman, and whatever storm we're facing, no matter how big, is like us trying to punch Superman. It's not doing anything to it. Superman's not going to feel it. It doesn't impact him. It doesn't hurt him at all. And we have to remind ourselves and weigh what is to come. Because there are certain storms and trials that we're going to go through that we're going to probably have to live with our whole life. But that does not mean that that is the end of your story. Because what's to come is far greater and far better. And we oftentimes weigh what is this life versus what is eternal. And what awaits us, it's so beyond our imagination. You can't imagine a world without sin. You can't. The best way that we know how to do it is to say it's a world without sin. It's a world there where there is no fighting, where there is love. We can't wrap our minds around it. And so Peter is setting in front of us what is to come is far greater and far better, and these trials do not hold a candle light to what is to come. And so if you allow your focus to be on eternity and what Jesus is going to do when he redeems everything, then it is going to allow you to rejoice and to give you confidence and strength, because this is not all there is to your life. We allow the smallest fraction to be the deciding factor for what is infinity past it. A life in eternity where there is no end. There is no sin. The best way that somebody has explained eternity to me would be is if you had a hummingbird go from the west coast and take one grain of sand from the beach and place it on the east coast. You know how long that would take the hummingbird? Almost eternity. We allow that one grain of sand to define our beach. We have got to allow our focus to be on something greater than just getting through the storm. And that when the Lord shows up, there is going to be a joy-filled moment that welcomes all of eternity, where he redeems everything. It is hard for us to have an eternal focus on what is to come, because we are like the kids that chase a soccer ball. My mind is constantly set on what's in front of me. My mind is constantly set on what's causing me pain, what's causing me suffering, and I just want to get through till the end. But if I can pick my head up, then I know where I'm going. And that's when soccer starts to separate from those that are starting to learn versus those that are really good, is that they don't look down and see where they have to kick the ball. They know where they're going. For us, we have to know where we're going and where our focus is. And so are you going to continue to allow your focus to be right in front of you? Or are you going to allow your focus to be on what's coming up? Because if we can allow our focus to be on what's coming up, then something beautiful can happen within you. Where you're giving the ability to rejoice in storms, to have the strength to get through it, because of what's to come. I want to end with talking about Paul. And there's two areas that Paul talks about himself, and it's just always just stuck with me since I was a teenager and read it. In Philippians 2, Paul is talking to the church, and Paul's in jail. And so in jail, and during that time, most of the time they would just dig you a pit, and they put iron bars over it. Okay, so you don't have this nice little jail. When we picture jail cells, they have those nice little paintings for you in books. That's not a jail. Most of the time, they dug a pit. You went in the pit. When it rained, all of that filled up. Sorry. They didn't care. And so as Paul is sitting there in jail, suffering, he's telling the Philippian church, he said, for me, it is far better for me to die and then to live. To die is gain, and then for me to live is Christ. And he's not talking like, woe is me. In Philippians, he is looking forward to being with Jesus. It is that he loves Jesus so much that he wants to be with him. And when I read that passage as a teenager, I couldn't say that. There was so much of my life that I wanted to live. And I would say, Jesus, you can come back after this point in my life. Let me live for a little bit. And there's parts of me that still are like that today. And so, Paul, for me, it just blows my mind that our life, and we work so hard to extend our lives as long as we can. That's a good thing. We fight and we scratch and we just work so hard to extend our lives and to give our lives such a big, to find joy in the best ways that we can, to extend it out and to live life to the fullest. And yet we so little focus in on what's to come in eternity. And Paul, as he's writing, as he's in jail, is saying that what's coming is far better, and I would rather just press fast forward through my life because Jesus is far greater. And then in 2 Timothy 2, 2 Timothy is the last book that Paul writes in the New Testament. And so Paul is getting very close to death. And so he tells Timothy that what he's doing right now is he's still in jail. That what it is he's pouring out like a drink offering. That's an Old Testament imagery, but it's really beautiful. If you were going to go make an offering before the Lord and you were wanting to go just a step above, to make an additional offering, well, you would come in and you would bring in your offering of meat, and that animal would be sacrificed and be offered on a burnt offering. So catch it on fire, and it would just burn up. At the very end, towards the end, you would buy a very expensive bottle of wine, and then you would pour it over the meat and what's left. And it would leave a sweet aroma in the air as the wine is burned. And that was called a drink offering. And so as Paul's gotten to the end of his life, and he has suffered so much, and he's continuing to suffer, Paul says that final stage is his drink offering. So as Paul's in a trial, he's saying that my response to life is this last act of worship. And it's just always stuck with me because when I go through storms, or even as I proceed into my life, will the last stages, the last seasons be this drink offering to the Lord? Or will I be much more focused on this earth? And so I share these two stories because I think Paul is such a beautiful example of what it means for us to enjoy our salvation and enjoy our relationship with the Lord. Paul loved Jesus enough to say that he would much rather die to go be with him. And as I've thought about that, that's a hard statement to make. I've got 3 kids. I've got things that I want to enjoy in this life. And so for me to love Jesus to that point is pretty amazing. And so I just want to set this up for you. I wanted us to talk about it. I wanted us to see what Peter starts off, and he's writing to a church that's hurting and that's in pain, that's gone through storms, and is continuing to go through storms. He sets them up and gets them to focus in on their relationship with the Lord and to continue to set their focus on what's to come, not getting through the storm. That's not what Peter tells them. Peter doesn't say, hey, hold out hope because this storm might get better. This trial might end. He actually says the opposite. There's going to be more trials that are coming your way. But what's to come is far greater. And if you can keep your eyes set on what's to come, then you're going to get through this storm. So I want to pray for you. And again, I share all this, and I'm not great at it. There's moments where I'd trade the joy of my salvation for a cup of soup, trade it for things that I shouldn't be trading it for, and I allow my focus to be on the ball that's right in front of me instead of allowing it to be on eternity and spending time with Jesus. But I think it's something that we should all strive for. And that if we can do it with a right heart, the Lord will fill us up with joy and peace, confidence, where we can go through a storm and actually rejoice. And so I want to pray for each of you. If you wanted to take some time to pray, to possibly join the church or talk about salvation or anything that's on your heart, it's a perfect time to do it. If not, you can always grab me after the service. Let me pray for you. Jesus, we come to you, and Lord, you're amazing. God, thank you for being patient with me, and I'm sure everyone here. God, there's so many times where I know that I trade the joy of my salvation and I'm focusing in on my relationship with you for other things of this world. And Lord, you love us all the same. And so, God, I pray for everybody here. Lord, for our church, that we would pick our heads up and look at what's to come and allow that to fill us with joy, strength, confidence. And Lord, that we would also allow our relationship with you to be a source of joy, where we find happiness and strength, and that our relationship with you would be enough. We don't constantly need more things. We just need you. God, please be with us now. And I ask these things in your name. Amen.